Hey, good evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here, back in the saddle. We have got a lot to talk about tonight. It's a Monday, it's a holiday, MLK Day. A lot of folks celebrating the former civil rights leader, so hopefully you had a great Monday, but boy, do we have a lot going on. So we're going to jump right into it tonight with your weather impacts. Tonight, cold, and yes, the northern lights. We're going to talk a lot about that. Aurora Borealis, likely visible in parts of the Carolinas. It's always kind of a if and when we're going to see them, but the potential is there. Probably the strongest solar storm we have seen since last year when we had vivid Aurora Borealis. So we'll talk about a lot of that coming up in a couple of minutes. Late week, a little bit of a warming trend after some cold temperatures early on, and then this is the talk of the town, really, potential winter storm. And normally I would not be talking about it this much this early, except we've got some pretty good confidence in something happening and that something being a high impact. So that kind of combo is always one of those things where it kind of forces you to talk about it because it's just not snow. That's the one thing I will emphasize. It's not just snow. This is an icy mess that could cause significant issues. So tonight we've got lots of clear skies, maybe a few high clouds trying to sneak in from the west. Part of the reason there's a lot of confidence in the forecast for the weekend is there is a large reservoir of Arctic air. This is the most Arctic air we've had to use for a potential system all winter long, and honestly maybe for the last couple of winters, because the cold air is centered in eastern and central Canada, which is a much more favorable setup for us. So tonight it's cold. We've had these overnight lows in the teens and 20s. Tonight will likely be the coldest. As we go through the overnight hours, we'll see some really chilly conditions, and tomorrow probably a couple degrees colder than today. I think we topped out, I looked at the official high, I think it was right at 50. So we'll be a couple degrees cooler than that tomorrow with temperatures in the mid and the upper 40s. But let's start talking about the weekend here, just to give you a sneak peek before I get into the Aurora. Possible winter storm, and I almost want to take possible because it's likely going to be a pretty significant winter storm for a large section of the Mid-South. The questions are the track and specifics. And what I mean by that is how much of what? Is it going to be a little bit of snow, a whole bunch of ice, a whole bunch of snow, a little bit of ice? I can tell you one thing, it's not just going to be one of those. It is not an all snow, all rain storm. This is going to have a little bit of everything. So stay tuned for updates as we go through the week, because I think it'll be very interesting to see how this unfolds. So if you watched any of my earlier shows on WCNC Plus or follow me on social media, we've got some space weather to talk about, and we had a huge solar flare yesterday. It was pretty big. We've seen bigger ones, but for whatever reason, the coronal mass ejection, which is the plasma or the energy that comes from the sun, in this one made a direct impact on the Earth, and it interacts with our upper atmosphere, creating all kinds of fluxes in energy, protons, electrons, and that causes issues with satellites, GPS, airplanes, the grid. The grid's been adjusting all day, trying to keep up with that because it induces currents when you see this happen. But it also, for everybody that enjoys these things, Aurora Borealis, pretty significant chance we're going to see that tonight. And this is borderline G5, which you don't see very often. So the KP index was supposed to peak at 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's already at an 8. And why is that important? You can see the 9 line. That's how far south you could see the aurora with a 9. So with an 8, we can clearly see it in the Carolinas. If you remember last year, we saw those 2 events where it was very vivid. Both of those were around an 8 to 9. So this is a very similar setup. So tonight, I do think that view line will drop pretty far south. Again, the further south you are, the lower it is on the horizon, the more likely you're going to need a camera to kind of check it out. And that's always the thing about this. You can probably see it with the naked eye if you let your eyes adjust, but your phone camera on night mode is going to do way better, long exposure. You'll see more detail, more vividness. James has got all our cameras kind of aimed in that direction. We've seen them with our tower cams both times last year, so the pretty good chance in the dark locations like in Dallas and Lylesville, we should have a pretty good chance to see them. In fact, I think last fall we saw them on all our cameras, even in the city. That's how bright they were. So we'll transition to the weekend. You know my winter weather forecasting rules. These date back. I had to look this up today because everyone uses these now, and I actually developed them, and I'm proud that everybody's using them because they're a great communication tool. But these rules I came out with almost 10 years ago, but they hold true today. 5 to 7 day range, things are trending up. Yesterday, we started seeing the pattern recognition, and honestly, the pattern recognition is about as strong as I've ever seen it this far out. The details are the thing we don't know about. Look at this dip in the jet stream. Now, that's not the polar vortex. It's a lobe of it over eastern Canada, but you see how far south that gets to the Great Lakes? That's a lot of cold air. That's the area of cold air and the location you would want to see it for snow in the southeast. So, if I were to put like a textbook, like, hey, here, everybody that loves snow wants to know, what do we need to get snow? This is what you need right here. This is the kind of cold air we need. So I actually think the cold air is not the question here. I think it's going to be more the storm track and the moisture. So right now, the winter weather chances for the weekend, remember, we're 5 to 6 days out. They stand between 50 and 70%. That is super high for this time range. And that shows you how much of the guidance. If I were to say, people ask me what model to look at, I don't look at one specific model, but it's very rare that every single one shows some winter weather. You don't ever see that in our area 5 to 6 days out. So the scenarios are pretty cut and dry here. Southern track means more snow. Closer to the coast track means more ice and rain. But there's not many scenarios that have all rain. In fact, if this is a bust of a forecast, it's going to be winter weather or nothing. I don't think we're going to see much rain. So I'll talk about this more later, but get those winter weather kits together, and that means having food and water for a couple days, backup heating sources. If you don't have that, make sure you have blankets or warm clothing, because this has a real big power outage threat because of the ice significance. So for a timing standpoint, we want you to be weather impact alert late Saturday through all day Sunday. Slick roads and power outages are our number one concern, so hazardous travel up there, but this is a legit power outage risk because of the amount of ice. So stay weather aware. You're likely going to have to stay home for a day, day and a half, and make sure you have some backup power sources to stay up to date. So tomorrow, temperatures, again, no worries tomorrow. This is why we're giving you a heads up. You've got 4 days to prepare for this after today. Your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. And just to show you, whatever falls, going to be sticking around there. That's why Sunday, the high temperature of 29, the backside of this is really cold. We could see lows in the teens or single digits. So this is going to be a hard freeze behind the system. Stick around. We'll have more information on all this, a lot to talk about coming up in just 2 minutes.